So, hello everybody. We're on the Irish Influence again. We're talking about not St. Patrick's Day. We're talking about St. Patrick's Festival, and I'll explain that in a minute. But I do think it's important that we put some shape on this kind of weird and wonderful event that's now just 4 months away. Obviously, we're talking about a crazy Welshman, potentially Irishman from the 5th century. Died literally when he was 120 years old. And on the 17th of March every year, we celebrate the day he died. But the bizarre thing about, if those of you who've ever visited Downpatrick, where St. Patrick is buried and they have a kind of heritage centre there, it doesn't get very busy because in a way that people aren't interested in the man himself. It's his day that has become the sort of big global story. I was looking at some figures the other week in America, because we are talking to America. 13 million pints of Guinness are drank every St. Patrick's Day. Not solely by the 39 million people who claim Irish heritage in the US, but by everybody. And they spend a stunning $5.9 billion each year on St. Patrick's Day. Put it down another way, that's $40 per American on St. Patrick's Day. 60% of all Americans celebrate the day in some way. 83% of them claim they wear green. And now it's the biggest spending day in the US after Thanksgiving and Super Bowl Sunday. So, this strange 5th century gentleman has become a global story. The one thing I also looked at is the bizarre list. There's always these kind of online top tens, and the best or the most attended St. Patrick's Day is always a very contested territory. The shortest one isn't. The shortest one belongs to Dripsey, County Cork, which is 25 yards long. But the biggest are always the top three of New York. I apologise if I offend anybody from New York here. Having watched 72 parades in my life when I was working on this, New York's parade is probably the most boring in the world. Apologies, everybody. Allegedly followed by London, which I don't get. And then number 3, which is by far the most important, is the parade and the whole festival in Dublin. So on that basis, we're going to talk to Susan Kirby, who's the CEO of the St. Patrick's Festival. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you, Mike. Lovely to be here.
So do you want to explain, Susan, for those of people who aren't in Ireland and might not be familiar, just what is the festival? Because it's much more than just a parade.
It's much more than just a parade, and it's much more than just a day. Obviously, the entire thing pivots around the 17th, and the 17th is the iconic moment within it, and the big. We're known for doing big figurehead events. So if anybody's not familiar with it, Dublin is the capital city of Ireland. We close it down effectively, actually overnight, and then take it over for the entire day, the following day, to run north side to south side across the river with a huge spectacle of, and how Dublin differs very much so from New York would be, we have all those ceremonial aspects and, kind of our guests who come and a limited number of walkers. Everybody's pretty much performing in some way. We have our huge US bands and bands from all over the world that come in and celebrate with us. But we have pageants, which is amazing, beautiful, custom-made, commissioned street theatre that really brings the whole thing to life. We've got about 3,000 people participating in the actual physical parade. It's broadcast, it's streamed all over the world. It's obviously growing every single year in terms of the impact and the amplification of it. Hundreds of thousands of people come in, and it's on their bucket list to come and party with us and attend with us. Our president presides over the whole affair. And it's a really wonderful, proud moment to kind of close down the streets, perform in probably what's one of the most epically democratic ways to access the arts or celebrate the arts or give the arts. Prince or pauper, you stand shoulder to shoulder on the street, usually quite cold, let's be honest. So they're a committed audience, and they really cheer one another on, and it's a hugely uplifting, proud moment, and we welcome in kind of media from all over the world. It's one of the largest events in the world in that sense. We've over 500,000 people standing on the streets of Dublin. We've 3,000 people performing. We've media crews from all over the world. It's an exceptional, kind of unprecedented moment to gather and and celebrate everything that's the best of Irish. So um, it's both a kind of an invitation. It's fundamentally an Irish celebration, but it's also an invitation to the world. Anybody who either claims Irishness or just thought that they'd aspire to be Irish on the day, they're welcome. So that's day one, if you will, or one of the days. And then the wider program is actually and has grown very substantially into over a week now of other major events happening all over the city, nationwide events and cultural events. We take over beautiful spaces with the most gorgeous performances, everything from spoken word to music to literature, which is, I think we all agree is a celebration of Ireland.
And then obviously, Susan, I mean, you talk there about Irishness. I mean, the one thing, again, having been around the world when I was writing about St. Patrick's Day, outside of Ireland, most parades are kind of avowedly Irish. Everybody's in green, it's all the hats, it's the shamrocks, it's very, very obviously, here is Ireland. Whereas the festival theme each year changes. And when I look at the parade, it's okay, everybody around the streets is in the green hats and that looks it, but the actual parade isn't that kind of paddywhackery kind of kiss me I'm Irish type Irishness. It's something very different. It's telling a very different story. So I mean, how each year do you choose those themes? And as it were, because you're in one of the people in charge, what are you trying to put on the streets to speak to an Irishness?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's I think first of all, Ireland has a really rich tradition of street theatre and performance. So we're very lucky in that we have a really vibrant scene in terms of street and a really long pedigree of kind of showmanship and it's an area I'm very passionate about as well, because as I said, it's the ultimate in the democratic arts. And in my mind, it's also, I've always thought it was like a gateway to the wider arts. You may feel comfortable going into an opera house or a theatre if you've had an artistic experience on the street. The thematics that we choose, they're usually uplifting. They're broad enough that if I was a young contemporary spoken word artist, I could respond to it. Or if I was a theatre company, I could respond to it. But they also allow, we're quite, curatorially, we allow the artists to respond to the theme. And it would be wrong to direct them or over direct them. And that's where actually we found the real richness of the response artistically. So you will see everything there from kind of myths and legends and iconic locations in Ireland to stories to folklore to also then more contemporary things, which might be, we did a brilliant project with DIT, who they were at the time, who have a really strong pedigree in the space of design. And they responded completely differently to that kind of, contemporary or that kind of folklore look or that Celtic look. And it represented a modern Ireland. Ireland is, has its own equivalent of Silicon Valley. It's punching above its weight on an international stage. So that needs to be reflected as well. Just on your earlier points about around the world, what we have found is that there is a real appetite, and particularly, obviously, we have a huge connection into the US. There's a huge appetite for a broader potential celebration in, all over the world of Ireland at the time of. And I think the embassies do a great job of, exploring almost like a cultural program at the time of the festival. But I've been in Sydney, I've been in America, I've been in France and in Asia, and there's a real appetite to go I think because in a lot of cases there's a younger diaspora, that they're keen to they want to value the heritage, but they want the contemporary represented as well. So we try to respond to that. We try to capture that, and I hope we do. We do it justice, because it's a pretty broad brief. But at the same time as well, we're not snobbish about entertainment and fun and gathering, and the idea that, and geez, even more these days, like actually the simplicity of being able to get together in a group and cheer another group of people doing something, performing and entertaining you, is like mind-blowingly exciting right now. We're on a complete lockdown, so this is my world. So we're not snobbish about the concept of entertainment and fun and uplifting. And one of my favorite moments always on parade day, having staged this multi-million pound epic undertaking, is usually these really beautiful, profound, intimate moments. Can be with like a guard, which is a policeman or woman, doing a selfie with somebody in the crowd, and the pair of them doing a hug. It brings people together, and we really cherish that and celebrate that. So I suppose on the other side of it is there's a degree as well with the festival of using the festival as, or owning the festival, kind of reclaiming the festival in the last kind of certainly 10, 15, 20 years, that it's not an antisocial occasion. It's a family occasion. It's a cultural celebration, and that's how we would like it to be celebrated worldwide. We're not afraid, as I say, of entertainment and appropriately, kind of responsibly entertaining, or having a drink and going for lunch and whatever it might be. But certainly we've moved things, we've changed the dial into it being a cultural celebration and a family celebration, and come in and engage on that level. So yeah, it's a journey, I'd say. It's never a fait accompli, because what you're celebrating is never a fait accompli. So that's exciting actually for me. If that answers your question, Mike.
Yeah, and obviously, I mean, one thing, I've talked about this. You go around the world, or you used to, looking at similar events, but also talking to people who organise other kind of what I can call mega events around the world, mega festivals, national days, whatever it may be. In that context of watching and listening, and then you come back each year and have to start on the 18th of March thinking about the next year, and again putting, 500,000 people on the street and the entertainers, and building a week's program, and building in, whatever it is, the tourist numbers a couple of years ago, 1 million visits for the 3 days either side of the festival in terms of bed nights, and the millions that makes for the States. Do you still walk away, or do you still sit there and think, okay, actually St. Patrick's Day is different? All these other events, be they sporting, be they cultural, they're fine, they have similar dynamics, but actually the idea of a national day, which has gone global, there is something different about the 17th of March compared to all these other things.
Yeah, I do, if I'm honest, and that's it's, you're right. I've attended a lot of events around. Actually, there was an incredible gathering in Sydney a few years ago of the big events, and an observation was a lot were sport. So your World Cup, your Olympics, etc. A lot were run by men because of the fact that they were in sport, and in the space of that kind of hybrid between civic and artistic and mega, St. Patrick's Festival occupied a really unusual really unique space, and I think as well it's unprecedented. I've also spoken, interestingly, kind of the diplomatic effort. So the economic diplomacy that happens at the time of the festival is actually bizarrely outward facing, and to me that makes complete sense. But what happens is that the converse also happens. So Irish diplomats and politicians, etc., it's well known that they travel all over the world at the time of. But what also happens is that there's the equivalent diplomatic here. So sitting on the stand on the day or around the time of the day will be everyone from the US ambassador to, the ambassador of India, etc., 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 all sitting together. And it's powerful. And then it's powerful to think that in their countries, Seoul in Korea has this incredible parade. There are amazing parades all over the US. And then there are, like in Sydney, in Perth, in Brisbane, there's these incredible festivals as well. They've grown into festivals too. So that is utterly unique. Like I've spoken to the French about Bastille Day. I've spoken to the diplomatic corps here, who would be from other countries, will always reflect that if they owned it, they would, they'd give their right arm to own it, frankly. And it is a priceless national asset, I believe. I'm slightly biased, obviously, but a priceless national asset of the country, which I would like to see, developed and nurtured and treated in that way. And I believe it's on a great journey in that sense. So yes, I do think it's different because of the fact the adoption of it, and the fact that other we haven't controlled necessarily. A lot of the response to it is very organic, and has come about, and could be a GAA club in Argentina who have set up their parade, or set up their festival. That's magic. That's just really, it's really powerful. So I think that is very much the Irish influence. It's that gathering of Irish people who go, well, we're going to be celebrating it, so let's build and build and build on it. But I have noticed, and I did say it there earlier, like in Sydney, there's the last time I was there, there's a huge number of Irish people there in Australia who are, they've only gone there in the last 20 years. They're young, they've young families there, but they're planning on staying there. And I imagine there's a similar cohort in Canada, in America, in England, and Europe. And I believe that, they are interested in constantly revisiting what St. Patrick's Day and what St. Patrick's Festival could be. So I look forward to how they continue to grow it.
I do think you're right. I mean, I think I was in a meeting last year with the people who are kind of reconfiguring the South Boston Parade, but they were all under 35. And their view was that these traditional forms of the sort of avowed Catholicism of the day, the AOH, all those kind of organizations that owned St. Patrick's Day in the sort of 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s and built it to what it is, also time had moved on. So there was that need to refresh it. And in terms of refreshing it, and obviously the one thing, again, I'm always struck with the festival is it's been a very kind of mobile event that actually does respond to changes within Ireland. So, I mean, I think one of the biggest ones, I know you've been very keen on it. Obviously, Ireland went from being a country that had barely any immigrant population to having 15, 16, 17% now, mainly since 2004, so in the last 15, 16 years. How do you feel the festival's actually opened its arms and actually said, okay, we have these new communities who are either learning to be Irish, have defined as Irish, they're on a journey, but they're not definitely dressed in green and Catholic and white. So how's the festival been choreographed in a way to actually include those people, to actually allow for that kind of redefinition, for that widening of Irishness?
Yeah, funnily enough, actually, I would say, again, quite organically, something that's happened, or to reference our volunteer program. So all festivals rely really heavily on volunteerism, and no, we really do, and we have huge volunteer networks. And it may sound like something that's actually not, kind of business critical, and in fact it is. The traditionally where our volunteer base has come from, it's quite interesting. It's been a lot of overseas students who are studying here, which in the Boston College context is really interesting. And people then as well from communities, newer communities. So, say, particularly, let's take the Polish community in Ireland in the last 25 years. They were volunteering to integrate, to learn, to expand their networks, to be social, but also to gather themselves and to have a moment to gather and celebrate themselves. And like when running programs, we don't so the way that New York would have people walking in the parade and everybody comes, they have their own banner. We don't tend to do that. Actually, you are walking under the banner of the entire parade. You individually can be different groups, and one of the programs that we do is a wonderful program called City Fusion, and it has, gosh, it could be like 15 or 20 different groups, and that's everybody from people with various abilities to people from different backgrounds, ethnicities. So we've the Polish group, we have the Japanese group from DCU, we had a Bengali group, which also all sorts of different backgrounds and abilities, as I say. And the idea actually, when we speak to them, was so they choreograph, they work with professional choreographers, they build, they make, they learn about the concept and the art of street theatre, the work, and it's like there's a lot of work that goes into street theatre. My background is in theatre, and putting on a theatrical production is significant. Putting it on on a concrete stage with very little kind of staging and lighting to hide the glitches is really, really difficult. With an audience who are literally touching distance away from you, you get your critics. There's no waiting on a newspaper, so it's really difficult to do. But their reflection on that was that it is an honor and such a huge thing for them to say, I went to Ireland for my year studying, or I'm living in Ireland now, and you will not believe that I just performed in front of the president and hundreds of thousands of people cheered me on, and I was on national television, and the usual like kind of mum tune in and have a look at me kind of, can't be underestimated. But we certainly saw that there was a huge appetite through those programs for newer communities to engage and express their agency in terms of what their Irishness would mean. So that could be somebody who was born in Poland but now has married an Irish person, or their children are all born here, certainly in the last 25 years, or they're here 20 years, they consider themselves Irish. And it's a really rich space. And from that, we also got quite a lot of, I suppose, we did things that challenged, because we can, we're not, because we are so broad, actually, we can push the barriers. And I don't know if people realize, but actually street theatre can be some of the most subversive content that you'll see, and always has been. The kind of, if you go right back to kind of your Punch and Judy show, like it's, there's no barriers in terms of the content in the way that other disciplines might be, really sanctioned. So we can push the barrier with things. And what we did find, we have an artistic director and a programs team, so they will go out and look for the voices, but the voices felt like they kind of gravitated towards us because they didn't have an access into the traditional establishment. So they kind of came to us. And then we did a couple of distinct events. So we did a big event in the National Concert Hall, actually, which would be a beautiful space. One I'm really close to. Our chair was the former director of it, and we brought some young emerging spoken word artists from all sorts of backgrounds, and we gave them the stage. And I think it actually, again, that was like, wow, I'm on the stage. It's like, I presume, you know, Carnegie Hall or an equivalent kind of iconic space. And again, it invited people in. So, you know, we'll continue to, actually, a space that we're really interested in is the conversation between, let's call it, an older statesperson in the arts talking to an emerging person, or two different disciplines, or taking an artist who is, you know, a profoundly kind of, you know, Gaeltacht dwelling traditional artist, speaking to a young, you know, Nigerian Irish spoken word rap artist, and we can do that. So it mixes it up, and it means that people say, okay, this, I see me in that festival, which then it is then a celebration of Ireland. Yep. I hope.
Okay. Joe?
Yes, Susan, thanks. Yeah, and I don't think there's anybody who partakes in or even watches the St. Patrick's festivals here without their heart being lifted. I mean, the colour and the excitement, and as you say, the inclusivity. And I think, much older than you, how different it is from the world that I remember and from the Patrick's days of the past, which were, I think, celebrations, as I remember them as a child, of austerity and of piety, and of a kind of propriety in that. They were a very different thing. I just wonder if there's anything being lost there. Is there any fear that something has been mislaid?
I know what you mean in terms of, if you look back, there's a somberness. There's a, you know, very organized, you will celebrate now kind of card held up. I don't know. I think it is a natural progression, you know, like I fondly, everybody I've ever spoken to, so say, for example, a lot of the Grand Marshals that we've had, Liam Cunningham is a world-renowned actor. He's everybody would know him from Game of Thrones, probably, and other major movies. Liam's a dub. Right. He's a former electrician. He's dyed in the wool kind of dub boy. And when we approached him to be the Grand Marshal, the year he was the Grand Marshal, he said to me, you know, he remembered his dad taking him in, and they had a spot on O'Connell Street, and he'd be up on his dad's shoulders, and he was so, Brendan O'Carroll was the same. There's still a real warmth to so much Irish nostalgia, despite the fact that it was pretty grey and monotone and a bit dreadful. There's still a lot of warmth towards that, I feel, anyway. You know, I'm probably on the cusp of when things started to slightly get better. But I like, I've obviously looked at a lot of our archive footage and things.
Was there any resistance in Ireland, as there most certainly was in the United States? And I'm thinking of Boston, I'm thinking of New York. Was there any resistance in Ireland to that great shift in the mode of Patrick's Day parades?
So I wasn't there at the very beginning, but again, I've seen a lot of the files and everything. No, I feel that there was a real, so it was a group of creatives who got together, you know, a theatre director, one of the top lighting designers in Ireland, and various other creatives who kind of came together and said, like, good God, please, we have to do something to this. The idea as well that, you know, basically the states were completely, you know, knocking it out of the park by comparison with us. And I think they felt very much that they weren't ever going to do it that way, because that's not probably, it was beyond our scale at the time. But also, their sensibility was obviously coming from a very artistic place. So they designed something, I think, which started off, and immediately it was literally like going from, you know, black and white to Technicolor, and people just responded really positively to that, and they kept pushing it further and further and further. And I think with every kind of director and every artistic director and every board, they've each expanded it further and further, to the point where I hope, and I do believe that, you know, people are proud of it. And or, you know, they've obviously, there's been times when, you know, we've had controversy or people kind of going, you know, that's not Irish, or this isn't Irish, or whatever it is. But actually, interestingly, we usually don't have to respond, because the crowd respond, and I like that. You know, I find that an interesting thing. We usually don't have to defend our position; other people do, which, you know, I think is you've opened the conversation, and people have reflected on the fact that actually that is Ireland now. You know, it's all of those things.
Or it's a bad thing that, I mean, when I see these parades and I see people actually wearing these outfits that I can buy in any store in town, and with a silly hat and a big red thing, whatever else, and dress up as a leprechaun and dress up as a kind of a clown for the day and whatever else. Yeah. It's hilarious and it's very funny. And is it a measure, would you say, of our maturity, this self-deprecation? Or, as some people have said to me, that they think the Irish kind of making fools of themselves again. Does that concern you at all? Is that just people being silly?
No, it doesn't. Honestly, it doesn't. Again, as I said, the idea of having fun, you know, is I'm not personally a fan of
leprechaun,
you know, the paddywhackery, and we absolutely don't do that. But I don't know what they should do, and if you want to, you know, put on a silly hat and whatever, and actually, interestingly, you'll find less and less Irish people doing that, and more visitors actually doing that, which you know, that's the same. I've had the same conversation with the guys who do Hogmanay. It actually usually morphs into a kind of two-tier kind of response to festivals. So you've got the domestic response to it and the overseas one. You know,
that's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, well, Pamplona would probably say the same thing to you. You probably won't see the entire kind of population of Pamplona coming out and, you know, throwing themselves around, but you will, you know, if you've gone on a trip to the place, you probably will go, I'm going all out, and, you know, why not? Good luck to you. I think as well, though, that there's a full spectrum of response to it, because we've got everything from kind of, you know, our Taoiseach holding, I believe, one of the only confirmed dates in the president of the US's diary, to people wearing crocheted green, white, and orange suits. You know, so it's got the whole thing going on. It's a full kind of Gone with the Wind number. It's got everything. And I don't try to prescribe. I don't over analyze that. Because I think if you want to engage with it academically, as I say, you can. And Joe, that's why, you know, we work and have a, you know, if you want to have a quiet St. Patrick's Festival, you can. If you want to have a family one, you can. If you want to have a bombastic one, you can. Yeah, and I say best of luck to you.
And can I just actually suggest to people that you're very welcome, of course, to ask any questions that you wish, actually, on the chat there. Just print in your questions. And can I just continue that just a little bit further, as we're coming up towards Christmas, and people worry that Christ is being left out of Christmas. Is there a danger that St. Patrick is being left out of Patrick's Day? Is there?
Yeah, this is something that I think Mike kind of spoke about there, you know, in terms of it's an unusual one, in that, like, St. Patrick wasn't Irish, and actually maybe that speaks, it's always spoken quite strongly to me about the fact that actually, you know, when you say New Irish. If ever there was an emblem, or kind of a personification of, he was. He came here in the 5th century. He brought Christianity to Ireland. As umpteen kind of myths built around him, not least the kind of banishing of the snakes and all of those things. We have remained kind of apolitical and a-religious in terms of the festival, but we also have done again, this has been a space where maybe from a kind of learning and outreach space, we've done different events, so people, if they wish, they can learn more about St. Patrick, and they can we've done beautiful events in Patrick's Cathedral, or different spaces that might be relevant to his life, as opposed to going in as this is a celebration of a man from the 5th century who was from Wales, which actually, doesn't, it runs out of road a little bit, actually, in terms of it being the core reason for the celebration. But we have considered it at length. And we've done a couple of different things. So there's a multi-denominational mass that comes from Patrick's Cathedral, which we would promote to people if they so wish. But it's not the core of the festival.
Oh, but it's there. That's great. That's great. Thanks very much. Yeah, great.
I do think, Susan, I mean, this is, I think, one of the sort of interesting tensions these days, that in a way, St. Patrick, it's kind of old news. If you want it, it's there. The real attraction in some ways and the real spread of the day is obviously Irishness, not the guy with the bishop's crook, etc. And do you find that when you're sort of, as it were, kind of explaining and selling the festival, there is this tension between something which is artistic and cultural on the streets of Dublin versus those other kind of news stories? How many bed nights have you brought into Dublin? Which ministers are going on their jolly kind of thing? What about these parades going on else around the world? There is this kind of very broad church of all these different messages. And in a way, where does your brief sit? I mean, does your brief just sit with the festival, or are you in there talking to, foreign affairs and different people saying, look, when you're going off to Tokyo or Boston or wherever it may be, spread the word of the festival or use the day? How does that all work?
I suppose it's a really good question, in that, yes, there is a beginning and an end to, where our jurisdiction would be. Like, we are primarily organizing the festival. I don't personally have a huge challenge in being able to say, I'm multilingual, if you will, in that I can sit here and talk to you about the 73 million return to the economy, the bed nights, etc. But I can similarly sit here and say that actually the most profound part of it is the intangible, which is that gathering together, a sense of pride, how the world connects with whatever its Irishness is at the time of. That's the power space of that festival. But the idea, we don't influence. We work really closely with Department of Foreign Affairs. We work really closely with Department of Arts and Tourism. A key partner for us would be Dublin City Council. Similarly, it is festivals by their nature, as I imagine your work would be. They're absolutely the sum of their parts, and there's no one area can be reasonably successful, but actually you need it all to work to make it truly successful. And probably the most kind of potent festival, to a degree, picks the part that you are the specialist in, which in our case is the festival and curating the festival. And then we use Tourism Ireland to promote the tourism message. We use Culture Ireland to promote the culture message. The Diplomatic Corps do the diplomatic work. We feed them and work with them as closely as we can in terms of content and stories and angles. but actually everybody has to kind of do their part, because it's actually so big that it's impossible for us really just to do it all. But I don't, I suppose, I don't fundamentally have a challenge in being, as I call it, bilingual. Like I can advocate here for you about the cultural importance. I'll also talk to you about the social importance, and then I've no issue articulating that in economics. And to be honest, I think it's something that the cultural sector probably needs to get more adept at doing. It's not wrong to make money from your art, or it's the filthy lucre is everybody has to eat. So I'm okay with that. And in a way, actually, sometimes I think festivals and people like me in festivals are the people who go and get the funding and make all those business cases and then facilitate artists. So hopefully we help their lives a little bit, because they certainly need it in these days. It's been really challenging.
And what was the word time? But I mean, what was last year like in terms of, early this year, in terms of the COVID story had started sort of into the new year. Clearly Ireland was inching towards some big decision. And there was a lot of noise about whether or not the festivals could go ahead. I don't know, but my guess is the critical decision was, if you're going to put 500,000 people onto the street, that's the wrong thing to do. And clearly the doors came down 3 or 4 days, maybe a week before the festival was due to kick off. And in that sense, you were the first, big victims of a COVID cancellation. What was that like to just scrabble around within the space of not, some events now are going online. It's a very kind of leisurely transition. You had a matter of days and hours. What was that like still to deliver something in a world now? I mean, obviously staying at home and Zooming, it's old news. Back then it was, you were hit the ground running.
Yeah, we were really in the eye of the storm. I think we were kind of early January, and we had a board meeting, and we have risk registers, and so there's a very technical side to the festival as well, which is like, this is a world-class festival in terms of the presentation of a major event and all of the kind of event management plans and the operational plans. Anyone who knows Dublin knows that we actually traverse, I think it's, we're going north to south, but we're crossing past 3 maternity hospitals, a couple of the biggest kind of locations for the HSE. It's an all kind of statutory effort as well. Everything from like our train systems to our bus systems to our hospital systems, ambulance systems, everything. We consult with all of them on the presentation of the festival. So our risk registers actually picked up that there was an issue in China, but at a very kind of, that's going on the risk register, going to put it, as to watch. And it was the impact of COVID was as fast moving as I think the spread of the virus is. Very quickly in the Irish context, what actually came into the first foray, if you will, was the rugby, and it was against Italy. So we had a very significant game against Italy here in Ireland, and at the time, in that period between those couple of weeks in January, Italy started to really hit the headlines and be in a really awful state. And there was huge conversation here, and simultaneously St. Patrick's Festival and the parade came into the vernacular as being what's going to happen there. So actually we had behind the scenes a longer lead into the cancellation, but it was extremely fast moving, and it doesn't matter if you feel that probably the right thing or where you're going to end up is cancelling. When you are the custodians of something of the scale and importance, and I say that both kind of socially and economically, of St. Patrick's Festival, you make sure that you have done absolute due diligence in terms of every decision that's made, which we did, and there was a lot of engagement with the authorities, the health authorities, in terms of the risk analysis, and ultimately it was the Taoiseach and the CMO, the Chief Medical Officer, who called that the festival was cancelled, and that was, we appreciated that, and we needed that to happen, actually, and that was the right thing to happen, and it absolutely was the right call, and we all know that. However, it, from a team point of view, from the point of view of, it's a juggernaut, and it's a juggernaut that was well on the road. We actually have the accolade of being cancelled not once but twice. So all of our big events were cancelled on the Tuesday of the week, and then all of our wider programs. So we still thought we were going to have maybe, Lisa Hannigan, we were talking about earlier, in the concert hall, and Annie Mack in a storehouse, and we were going to have like this beautiful program. Smaller, more intimate events all got cancelled, and like there are thousands of people affected by that. But if you track backwards slightly, what I said about the idea that we had a couple of weeks, we had picked it up on our risk register, and therefore it needed a response. We had begun to contact everybody, talk to everybody about different scenarios and possibilities. And I have to say, actually, despite the trauma of it, it was enormously heartwarming to have the festival reflected back to us in people's support, and also to have what happened then was this lovely organic kind of, we will parade, we will have a festival anyway. So you had people pulling kids around farmyards in like their own little parades, and little kind of things happening in the States, in Dublin and what have you, which was lovely. It was great. It was our virtual parades, but it was I didn't sleep for 3 weeks, which would be the norm for me, but it was like no sleep, and there's an intense pressure. We've always been in the space of protecting the well-being of 500,000 people, so actually that is not new to us, but there was an intense pressure because actually we've learned so much about COVID in the last number of months that we just, as you say, we absolutely did not know then. And we had artists who were maybe older, vulnerable, who felt that they were like, no, I can't perform, and obviously we were absolutely no problem, but it was very unknown. It was very traumatic in that way, but we had a duty of care to all of our artists, our suppliers, our arts workers. So if another big thing that's emerged from here in Ireland is that it takes a lot more than just the artist being on stage. It's the techs, the sound techs, the electricians, they're all out of work, and St. Patrick's Festival is a significant employer in that way. So I'm pleased to say we were able to honour our commitments because our stakeholders honoured their commitments, and they should be commended for that. So it was traumatic, Mike, but it was it ended in the best place it could.
Joe.
I want to backtrack just a little bit, if I may, Susan, actually, because here's a question that I'm wondering about, and perhaps you've kind of, to some degree, answered this, is, this huge transformation, this absolutely fabulous, enormous thing that seemed to me to almost suddenly happen, though, of course, there was an awful amount of planning, and I know exactly, I've an idea of just how much work went into it, indeed. Was that entirely actually an Irish thing? Where did you look? Are there other festivals in the world that you're imitating? Now, I know that we borrowed something from America, indeed, but this whole phenomenon, is that based on somebody else that was doing, or is the whole, that whole marvelous effervescence an Irish invention almost over the last few years?
No, I'd say like
Inspirational.
Irishness itself, it's you know, been very kind of porous and absolutely best practice. You look at different places and kind of say, oh, I like that, or that's very smart. And similarly, we've had a lot of entities look to us and say, like, for example, I know at the moment the Scottish, who would be renowned as certainly in Edinburgh as being a festival city, and you know the 12 sisters that happen in August, but the Scottish have appointed, kind of almost doing it like an intern program, an exchange between Ireland and Scotland, so they can. Yeah, so they can now learn, well, specifically so they can learn more about our diaspora strategy, if you will. And the Welsh are doing something similar, but the Irish actually are taking from the Welsh from the point of view of language. So, you know, how have the Welsh created such an integrated language strategy around the use and kind of life of Welsh? So I think it's very porous, and again, it is fundamentally an Irish festival, obviously, and you know, everybody working on it's kind of Irish, but absolutely you take back best practice from all over the world.
And just continuing, just that particular question there about the language, indeed, to what degree I would hope that the Irish language actually itself actually maintains a place within the festival season.
It does absolutely. So I'm a Gaeilgeoir. I'm not I went to an all-Irish secondary school. So I'd be a slightly unusual person in that sense. There's more of me now, in that none of my family spoke Irish, and I went to an all-English speaking primary school. But I had a very passionate teacher who decided I was great at languages and that I wasn't. But she told me to go to this Irish language speaking school, which I did. And for about a year and a half, I thought the word reformation was actually an Irish word. But I was 12, so you'll forgive me. But I'm really passionate about Irish. And again, probably in that very accessible way, because the Irish have such a bizarre relationship with Irish, that I'm determined to kind of say, you know, it's not, it is available to you. You probably have more of it, you know, in you than you realize. And if you, whatever your ability, whatever your level, you're welcome. And the program very much reflects that. Interestingly, that you bring up Irish, just a reflection. We work with the department, and we had a beautiful Irish program planned. One of the events that we had was a gorgeous Irish artist called Mangal Mankin, who's just published a book about 32 words for field, which is that Irish phenomenon that there are 32 words in the Irish language for the word field. So, you know, it's such a rich language.
And
but the idea
it is
that,
indeed, and thanks, Susan, for remarking upon Mannequin, indeed, who will be one of our guests actually here in spring.
Brilliant! Oh, he's amazing. He's amazing.
The amount of
I'll definitely tune in to hear from him. But I remember thinking at the time of the talking about the cancellation and everything, a little bit after that, organically, everybody kind of started gravitating back towards these Irish sayings. I don't know if you noticed that or if you remarked on that, but you know, the Irish news would close off with like Ní neart go cur le chéile, or you know, these kind of rousing sayings. And I remember talking to the guy that funds us from the Department of the Gaeltacht, and I said it to him. I was like, I think it is because the Irish, you know, that's a language that people who had been through incredible trauma, incredible, you know, mass events experienced, and they learned resilience, community, togetherness, and actually the simplicity of it. We just gravitated back to it. So we're really keen actually for next year to have a strand which explores that. So yeah, it's
Good.
really,
So much.
I wish it was bigger in the festival, but it's something I'm very passionate about.
And then, sorry, just a questions. Rob was asking you, obviously, New York and Boston have had, obviously, over the years, kind of arguments and discussions and all kinds of things about the LGBT issue. There's been arguments in the US about parades, or particularly around the politics of the Troubles. And obviously, the festival now is 25 years old, and it hasn't actually had a major controversy. There's been no kind of fun fights or denouncements or, big public debates about what is being displayed or what's being shown. How have you avoided that?
I don't know that we have necessarily tried to avoid it, but I think the curatorial approach is actually, so that what I said earlier is that it's apolitical, it's areligious, and actually the groups don't walk, as I said, under their banner. So it's not about you espousing a movement or whatever it would be. If you're participating in St. Patrick's Festival, I don't, it matters me not if you are gay, straight, you identify in one way or another. It really doesn't, it's got nothing to do with me. The reason why we're engaging with different groups, and when we do have LGBT groups in the parade and in the festival, and but that's not the point. The point is that they are one of the other groups who participate in the festival, and I think that actually immediately takes out the politicization of a day, if you will, and actually inviting in issues has been our strategy. But straight away, if like we've had a lot of groups contact us, and I mean some truly bizarre kind of things, have contacted us and said we'd like to do X, Y, or Z in the parade. And the moment that you say to them that you can, but we'll be having you respond to a curatorial piece, which means that you're all going to be reenacting kind of Tír na nÓg. You're not going to have a banner. You're not going to have an opportunity to protest water rates or whatever it might be, or your political ideological leaning. That's not up for grabs. They're not interested. It's not on offer. So it's not contested. And what's also not on offer is that it matters a jot about where you come from or who you believe or who you love to participate in it either. So I do realize that it's been really controversial and difficult for different reasons in different areas. But I've given some advice to some of the people responsible for those, not necessarily in the States, actually, similar in the UK, in Scotland. There's some pretty contentious kind of political backgrounds to the concept of parading. And actually, I think if you hold firm on apolitical, areligious, and come from an artistic point of view, and what you're saying is this is everybody coming together under our banner, that's the purpose, that it actually eventually will make sure that doesn't become an issue. It will take investment and time and courage and commitment, but I do believe that that is the way to create something that is truly accessible and fair and for all.
It's marvelous.
Thank you. We've come to the end. Susan, that was brilliant. Thank you very much.
Oh, no worries. God.
Thanks very
Joe,
much.
before we say goodbye properly, do you want to explain what's happening next week?
Yes, thanks very much, Susan. And next week we have, as we just mentioned, Joseph O'Connor. Some of you will know Joseph O'Connor from RT Radio, where regularly we hear him with just little snippets of everyday life that are always engaging and exciting and so beautifully observed. Other people will know from his great novel, Star of the Sea, from about 15 years ago, that won so many awards that you couldn't possibly count. And other people might know him from his most recent novel, Shadow Play, which I happen to be listening to, not reading right at the moment, and I'm absolutely stunned by it. He's one of the most marvelous observers of everyday life and one of the most beautiful chroniclers of character. And I know he's going to be a really exciting interviewee, and I'm hugely excited. I know Mike is hugely excited to speak to him there and to bring him to you here at the same time, which is 4:30 American time, 9:30 Irish time this coming Friday. Thanks everybody for being here. Thank you so much, Susan. It's been really, really great talking about St. Patrick's Day.
Thanks, Susan.
And Mike, do you want to?
No, thank you, Susan. That's absolutely brilliant.
Ramil Margaret, Susan.
For those, brilliant, Susan. And obviously, as we get into 4 months' time, and however the festival looks, people want to know, they can go to the website and find and start parading and do all kinds of things.
We are slightly delayed for obvious reasons in announcing plans, but we will be announcing plans shortly. And yeah, absolutely follow our channels and stay engaged with us. And as soon as it's safe to do so, we'd love to stand with you all again and celebrate.
Susan, thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
And thank you, everybody. See you soon. Take care.